Hello and welcome. My name is Earl Blacklock. I'm a Canadian Certified Counsellor and the Executive Director of Island Integrated Counselling on Vancouver Island in British Columbia. This series of videos is going to be on how to manage mental health and wellness and emotional wellness in the age of the COVID-19 pandemic. The subject of today's video is intended to provide a foundation for the subsequent videos that will follow. Today's video is about our three primary psychological needs and why people may be finding that they are in much greater distress than they thought they would be, and that they thought is reasonable under the circumstances. So under the current restrictions that most of us are facing, there's social distancing happening, there's isolation, or we're being asked to self-isolate in our homes, or if we have indications of the symptoms of the COVID-19 virus, then we're being asked to quarantine ourselves in our homes. And this is not a familiar place. When we go on vacation, we tend to go away. When we go to work, we tend to go away from our homes. So it's not a familiar experience for a large number of people. And they may then find this so unfamiliar that they start to experience distress as a result. And so I'm wanting to just walk through why that distress is completely understandable, and why that distress is something that can be managed, and the perspective that is useful and helpful to deal with that distress. So let's start with what our three psychological needs are. Our three psychological needs are autonomy, competence, and relationality. So what are those in turn? Autonomy is the sense that you are in control of your own life, that you are making the decisions that affect your life. You are autonomous when you are capable of exercising your sound judgment and making choices and choosing directions. As a basic psychological need, this is what every adult expects. This is what teenage rebellion is about, because the teenager starts to discover that they have this need for autonomy. This is something that we are constantly trying to protect and reinforce in our lives, because it's an important psychological element in the way that we look at ourselves and the way that we look at the world. The second psychological need is competence, which is essentially that you either have the skills, or you know where to gain the skills or acquire the skills needed to put the choices and the decisions that you've made in your autonomy into practice, into effect. When we have a high degree of confidence, we tend to have a high degree of self-worth. When we have a low sense of competence, we tend to have more shame. And the third psychological need is relationality. And relationality is ultimately about surrounding ourselves with people who support our autonomy and who support our competence. So when we have friends like that, intimate partners like that, family members like that, we find ourselves strengthened and reinforced in our capability to make good decisions and to act with confidence in our competence. So what does a pandemic do to those three psychological needs? Well, first of all, right away, our autonomy is taken away. We can't just decide that we're going to go to a cafe or to the movie theater or anything that requires us to essentially leave our homes. So we're very constricted in terms of expectations and requirements with regard to with whom we can gather, where we can gather, that sort of thing. Our autonomy takes a hit. Our competence also diminishes. We're no longer in the workplace where we have an ability to continually be reinforced in terms of our sense of skill and well-being, in our sense that we're making a contribution to the community, to the corporation, whatever it is that is important to us to validate. And then our relationality is impaired because we are denied the opportunity to have the best kind of interaction, which is the face-to-face. So what do we do when our three basic psychological needs are impacted by the COVID-19 virus? Well, the first thing that we can do is we can start to recognize that there is an impact. COVID-19 is, without question, going to have an impact on our autonomy, on our sense of confidence and self-worth, and on our relationality. There's no question about that. So to accept that, radically accept that, to recognize that there's very little point in focusing on the loss is a way for us to deal with that sense of loss and to move forward. In terms of our autonomy, we still have the ability to make a lot of choices and a lot of decisions. It's just they are not the same decisions we would be making if COVID-19 pandemic had not occurred. So what kinds of decisions can we make? Well, first of all, we can make decisions about how we spend our time where we are. There's a temptation to say, well, nobody's coming over, let's let things slide in terms of keeping the home neat. Let's not worry about how we conduct ourselves. We start to have conflict that could be avoided simply because we feel out of control, and so we start to act out of control. Our self-worth starts to take a hit, and it affects our relationships. So the starting point in dealing with something like the COVID-19 virus is to start acting with autonomy, making the choices that you want to make within the parameters of the people that you're living with, sharing the space with, and making good choices, making choices to plan for the future. A large part of dealing with the anxiety that arises from something like the COVID-19 virus is to deal with the present, to start to bring yourself into the present with a hopeful view to the future. So choosing to bring that perspective, that hopeful perspective, into each decision that you make is an important part of dealing productively and positively with the isolation and the constrictions that are caused by this virus. Then, in terms of competence, in a lot of situations, there is almost no barrier for somebody to increase their competence. Take a course that you've always wanted to take. There's a number of courses online that are free and that are from major universities that give additional skills. This is a good time to do that. Increasing the knowledge of your own field, doing more research, more general study, or simply learning how to play, learning how to interact with your family members, gaining better parenting skills, relational skills. All of these things will, at the end of the day, give you an ongoing sense of worth and competence that will hold you in good stead well into the future. And then in terms of relationality, there has never been a better time to be subject to something like this pandemic. We have technology, we have capabilities to communicate with people, in some cases, people that we haven't talked to for a very long time and that we've regretted the loss of that connection. This is a good time to improve your relationality by connecting with old friends and new. It's also a really good time to improve your relationality with those in your own household by learning skills in terms of managing conflict, bringing in techniques such as assuming the most positive interpretation of what was just said to you, rather than blowing your stack that you think somebody has just responded to you in a negative way. All of these opportunities are there, and you have time. In most cases, if you're not a medical worker, a first responder, if you're not one of the critical workers that is having to continue working during this period, you have time, and it's a really good opportunity to take advantage of that time. Speaking specifically to those who are still in the trenches, who are still busy and working, and who have the stress associated with working in the environment in the age of the COVID-19 pandemic, the same three psychological needs apply to you as well. You do have a need for autonomy. I've had people report that they are very anxious and very concerned for their safety. Part of autonomy is advocating for your own safety. You do have the right to refuse unsafe work, and you do have the right to speak up if you think there's a better way of doing things. You have a sense of competence because this is what you do and this is what you're skilled at, whether you're a grocery clerk or a firefighter or a nurse. But this is a really good opportunity to take note and observe that you are gaining new skills and gaining new confidence in your ability to handle pretty well anything. Because if you're able to manage your life, your career in the midst of the COVID-19 outbreak, you can manage it in pretty well every situation. And then in terms of relationality, don't let the relationships at home suffer because of the work that you're doing. Allow yourself to bring yourself into that situation, that place when you get home, allowing yourself to be both nurtured by and to nurture those around you without worrying about whether or not you are able to do it fully or completely. Whatever you're able to do within the energy that you have left, you will find is going to play dividends well into the future. So if you recall those three psychological needs, autonomy, competence, and relationality, and you focus attention on ensuring that you are meeting those three psychological needs on an ongoing basis, you are going to be stronger, more resilient, and more capable in handling not just what's happening now, but what will happen in the future. It will diminish your sense of worry and your sense of helplessness being out of control, because you will be acting intentionally and with purpose to ensure that your own psychological needs are met. I hope that has been helpful, and I will see you at the next session.